Hey, everybody, it's Matt Gurney, Jen Gerson here, too. It's the Line Podcast, recording this one in the afternoon, as we often do on April 11th, 2025. By the end of this recording time, we'll probably see where the markets close, but we're not going to stress about that today. We have all new things to stress about. When we come back, Jen's going to give us a vibe check. I don't really know what I'm in for here, so ride along with me and we'll find out. Also coming up, I'm going to talk about some interesting things in the campaign, including something I haven't seen. And I'm going to end by saying it's nice when people echo what I think. It makes me feel better about myself. This time on, frankly, whether or not this country is capable of getting anything done. All that and more in the latest episode of the Line Podcast.
This episode of the Line Podcast is brought to you by Unsmoke Canada, which is dedicated to helping Canadians who are looking to quit smoking understand the full range of options available. Despite decades of government programs and increasing regulations, today, nearly 4 million Canadians still smoke cigarettes. Adult smokers who choose to continue to smoke should be aware that other options exist. While not risk-free, alternatives such as heated tobacco, vaping products, and oral smokeless products provide a potentially less harmful choice. Smoke-free alternatives do not involve combustion or burning, like smoking a cigarette does. Instead of heavily restricting access and information about these options, Canada's government should be adopting common-sense legislation that will help further bring down Canada's smoking rates and put information in the hands of Canadians. Information such as the relative risks compared to cigarettes. Because the products are not the same, and they shouldn't be treated the same. It's just common sense. Learn more about how a smoke-free future can be achieved at unsmoke.ca.
So, Jen has told me she needs the first part of the podcast. Like, she has literally told me she needs to get some stuff off her chest. And Jen, am I wrong, or do you have written notes?
Oh, I do. I will confess that you asked me to change one little setting on Twitter in order to maximize our social media efficiency.
I decided
to be on Twitter just a little bit. And now I am 25% more emotionally unhinged than I used to be. And this led to a long, scrawly, creepy note situation that I'm going to lay into right now. Like, I'm looking at these notes.
How long were you off Twitter?
No, it looks like I'm about to bomb a building.
I know, but how long were you off Twitter?
Months and months.
Like many months, like many 8 months. Or 9?
Like, yeah, something like that.
And then, a couple of weeks ago, in order to connect my account and Jen's account and the Line's account so that we can use one content management system to push all of our data out, I needed Jen to go into her account and click like 2 buttons. And I even said to her, I'll do it for you. Give me your password, give me your login, I will go in, I will do it, and then you can change your password, and I never need to know. I even said as an option, have your husband do it. And I think he would have been up for that, but Jen's like, no, it's okay. I can have 1 drink.
Okay, now, that being said, I do think there's no such thing as true sobriety. 1, everybody falls off the wagon. 2, I think I do have it much better under control than in previous time.
You couldn't even finish your sentence.
I wasn't on Twitter all yesterday. I did not go on Twitter at all yesterday.
Because you can stop anytime.
Look, I will notice one is that Twitter actually has less of a pull for me now because it is more self-sorted among people who are sort of conservative and therefore you're not getting a spectrum of conversation in the same way before. And it has just gotten nastier and more pointless. So there's more bots on it. There's more just instant muting. So the appeal for it is not as high as it used to be even a couple of months ago. That's good. I mean, I think the most popular tweet I ever laid out in my Twitter career was, if Elon Musk destroys Twitter, that'll be the single greatest thing he ever did for humanity, and I'm including, the rockets and all that included. And I still think I stand by that tweet. But anyway, my brief exposure to Twitter and my fleeting exposure to Twitter has launched me on a whole tripartite rant. Okay, it's going to launch me on a tripartite rant, which I have actually some notes for. I'm not going to let it go into full-on video essay territory, But it does touch on the state of the campaign. I think it touches on the state of the parties, and I think it touches on the state of the culture. And Matt, I'm really just I'm gonna go in. It's a 3-part rant getting into, quote unquote, the media, the CPC's persecution complex, and also the difference between skepticism and anti-intellectualism. And I think all of these things are interrelated, and I think that they're all very topical when we talk about where the campaign is today in this godforsaken era, almost 2 weeks before E-Day cometh.
I'm just going to say that people might think we're hamming it up a bit when I say I have no idea what's about to happen, but I genuinely have no idea what's about to happen, because we had a podcast planned and Jen said she needed to call an audible on it. Jen, you have the floor. Go for it.
Right. So firstly, I will admit that my whole ramble here is going to start off because I was triggered by several sort of commentators talking about the media and how I am apparently unwilling to offer criticism of the media and the failures of the media. And I will admit, Matt, that I died inside, because I think that you have to have literally not be familiar with anything that I've written in the last 5 years to honestly believe that me or Matt is not willing to criticize the media. Okay? Like, Matt, how many hours of our lives, how many thousands of words have we written at the line offering sort of global criticisms of the Canadian media?
A lot.
And or specific criticisms of the Canadian media?
A lot.
If you were to guess.
A lot. And I'm not going to make a more specific guess than that. The only thing that you and I agreed upon as a rule when we started the line, and this is like before we published a single thing, one of the things we agreed on is that we were not going to do what so many independent media companies do, which was shit on the media as a way of driving sales. We were never going to be, they're lying to you, only we're telling you the truth, or all of those guys are wrong, we are the one true voice.
Everyone else is corrupted by the media subsidies, and so therefore, I think that we were
never going to do that. The only exception to it, and it's tongue in cheek, is that in the bottom of every article we publish is that tagline we came up with 5 years ago, which was that the last best hope, right? Which was deliberately born of our conversations of every independent media site or everybody. This is a dated pop culture reference now. Do you remember there was an entire genre of why I joined The Athletic? When like sports writers were like quitting their jobs and like why I joined The Athletic.
Which became why I joined Substack,
Which became why I joined Substack. And so many of them were, I am appalled by the corruption and the laziness. Jen and I are both originally creatures of the legacy media, and we know that the legacy media is really smart, talented people who are worked to death and under-resourced, and we were not going to be taking pot shots at them unless it was warranted.
We have part of our marketing pitch noted that we do not take subsidies from government and therefore are more reliant on subscribers to pay our bills. That I think is fair, and I think that's legitimate. We have devoted hours, entire sections of our life criticizing media subsidies. I have spent entire sections of my life talking about C11, C18, the Online Harms Act, C63. I have literally gone in front of House and Senate committees to talk about the media and the problems facing the media. Matt, we have published 1,000-word essays, multiple thousands of word essays, giving our readers a global view about what are the particular push and pull factors harming quality in the Canadian media industry. Okay, we have criticized the Google sort of shakedowns. We've done all of this. We have refused to accept subsidies. So when I have people in my stream basically criticizing me for not being willing to attack the media, I die inside. We have criticized the media a lot. And you want to know what we find when we criticize the media at the line? Our audience's eyes glaze over.
Mm-hmm.
They get bored because it's too inside baseball and it's too detailed and it's too industry specific. And they're not really looking for intelligent criticisms that are grounded in economics, culture, facts, and lived experience. They're not looking for that.
They
And
don't
I'm
want to
going to
be.
get
They don't
in.
want to be told what really went wrong. They want to be told their lazy, half-assed guess is right.
That's right. I'm going to get
Yeah.
into that, okay? But when people are talking about, quote unquote, the media, or they're angry that the media isn't going hard enough on Carney, or they're angry that the media hasn't gone hard enough on Pierre, how many times have you seen a tweet or a criticism from someone saying, the media is not hard enough on Carney's China connections or something like that, and as proof, they will link to something that appeared in the media? It kills me. What they are actually trying to say there is people didn't react as strongly as I want them to in response to this media story. Or people didn't, the general public isn't weighting this story with the importance that I weight it to. That's what they're actually saying. And the implicit understanding there is that all those other people, never me, of course, but all those other people are really just sheeple, and the media is dictating what they should be thinking or not thinking. And therefore, if they haven't come to my conclusions about how bad this particular error or gaffe is, that's the media's fault. But of course, the person making that critique always imagines that they're above that process, right? Like they're not sheeple. They're not beholden to like the media narrative. But all those other people aren't beholden close enough to the media narrative. And therefore, they're being brainwashed in the wrong direction, right? And I die when I hear that. Because frankly, that's not how any of this fucking works, all right? Matt and I, between the two of us, how many years in mainstream or legacy media do we have? Like 40 years? Between the two of us working in these fields?
Probably not, but close.
But close. And Matt,
like 36, 37? Like that's what my mind is coming up with.
Do you possess like a mind control, like thrall upon your audience? Do you tell them what to think?
Try.
No, we don't even try. Like that's not how it works. It's not like the legacy media is like a puppet master swaying the opinions of everyone around them. What's happening is that the media outlet and their audience create a kind of symbiotic relationship where we're putting stuff and content offerings out, and our audience is responding to that. And if the audience responds really well, we'll take that as a signal. We'll provide more of that content. But I can tell you, after roughly 36 years of media experience between the two of us, you and I never know whether or not this column or that column is going to pop off.
No, I'm consistently surprised.
We can sometimes guess what an audience will react to, and sometimes the guesses are good, but our guesses are maybe 60%.
Yeah, it sounds about right.
And I think that, even with lots and lots of experience, we are constantly, it is an art, not a science, we are constantly surprised by what our audience reacts to. And that was true when we were working in the legacy media, and that's true now that we're that we're independent media. It is a relationship that gets created between the content provider and the content creator. And as the content creator, I am not dictating anything about what my audience thinks or believes. I'm providing content offerings, some of which they respond to and some of which they don't. And if you're really, really, really good at this, you maybe have a 50% success rate in terms of your content providings and offerings.
Yeah, I'd say it's closer to 50 than 60. And it cuts both ways, right? Because there will be things that I will publish at the line, and I'll think to myself, well, yeah, it's not the most scintillating piece, but, it's another day, another dollar. Slow news cycle out there, and we'll roll with this. And it will do absolutely insane traffic, and then we will
never predict it.
We will pour our blood and our sweat and our tears into a piece that is just this manifesto of our worldview on a topical, important issue. That
4,000 words on the state of the media industry, for example,
that the audience has shown a lot of interest in, and we'll publish it, and it will do slightly below average metrics. Yeah, that's what happens.
Yeah. Happens all the time. So like this whole understanding about the relationship that you have between the audience and the media is fucked. It's wrong. That is not how it fundamentally works. And to be blunt, if I were even to do a real content analysis about sort of who's had it worse in this particular election cycle, conservative versus liberal, I would actually say it's probably about a draw. Like if I were to get like two TrueAnon style liberal partisans in the room, they'd be bitching about, how Rosie Barton was hard on Mark Carney and how the CBC deserves to censure her for it. They would be bitching about all kinds of what, probably that CBC article about the residential school stuff, about Carney's father. They'd be bitching about that kind of nature of stuff. And if I were to get two conservative partisans in the room, they'd be bitching about that Globe article that we featured in the Bullshit Bulletin 2 weeks ago about the foreign interference in the Pierre leadership campaign. And they'd probably be bitching about why Carney gets a pass for all these gaffes. Don't like, why don't we go harder on him on China and his lying and Brookfield and all these kinds of things. Like, all partisans hate media all the time. That's normal. It's normal for partisans to hate media all the time. And in this particular election, I don't think any particular partisan has more complaints than the other. This has actually been a pretty evenly focused firing round. Every single guy has got hit in this particular election cycle. That's probably a little less true than in previous election cycles. Like, we could go back and do a content analysis of previous election cycles, but in this one, it's actually been pretty even-handed. So, look, you may disagree with me. You may say, well, no, my guy got hit worse or whatever. That's fine. The point being is that the idea that one group of people has had an easy time of it this media cycle more than another group of people, I just don't think that any kind of objective look at the actual content, media content, would bear that analysis out. I think that usually what's happening is that people are seeing what they want to see. They're seeing stuff that confirms their priors on this sort of stuff, right? Which is, again, normal. That's fine. But here's where I get into my real rant about the state of the election cycle, and where all of this
that wasn't the real rant.
No, this is where my sense, and none of this, by the way. None of what I'm saying absolves media of its actual failings. I'm just not going to get into that at the moment because Matt and I have devoted days of our lives and many thousands and thousands of words to the media's failings. It's all been well documented on the line. You can Google this for 30 seconds. It's all there, okay?
Who has that kind of time?
Who's got that? What? Apparently we did. Apparently we had that kind of
time.
No,
I mean 30 seconds to Google it before assuming that they know what. Grammatically, you're going to do this again. No one has time to Google for 30 seconds to find out if we've actually ever taken a public position on an issue. They just assume our public position on an issue is whatever they think a tribalist would think based on something unrelated that they've read.
I perfectly understand that as a person who's in public life, 90%, not 100%, but 90% of the criticisms I deal with are coming from people who have not read a single thing that I've written front to back, and oftentimes are coming from people who have a perception of what my view ought to be based on what their understanding or belief of my tribal affiliation is. That's not 100%. About 10% of it is good, but 90% of it is that. So that's fine. You're going to assume that I'm a mainstream media hack because I've worked in the media for a really long time, and therefore I have this opinion about the state of the media, and I'm therefore completely unwilling to criticize my colleagues. Please call up my colleagues and let them know. That would be great. I'd really like to be invited to the parties again. But anyway, here's where all of this starts to feed into what I actually want to talk about, which is the state of the election. And that is, that the conservatives know that they're in trouble when they start to trot out their persecution complexes. And I'm real sorry because I know I'm going to piss off a lot of conservatives when I say this, but I've now heard your lines on your persecution complexes so often from so many different places and for so long, I cannot take them seriously anymore. I laid these out in the Bullshit Bulletin this week, but I'm going to get into them because they're kind of 3-part persecution complexes. One of them is that the entire Canadian country on all of its institutions is systematically aligned against them, not only in terms of the way that the electoral or the voter sort of perceptions and inherent biases play out, but the media is out to get them. All the institutions are out to get them. The entire sort of way that the votes are aligned, that vote efficiency is out to get them, essentially. And it's basically impossible for the Conservatives to form a winning coalition as a result of these systemic problems, okay? There's a grain of truth in some of it, I would say there's a grain of truth in the sense that the Conservatives need to win a much higher percentage of the popular vote in order to actually win a governing coalition as a result of the first past the post system. The Liberals and the left-wing parties, because they tend to be more urban parties, have a much higher vote efficiency. I think that is mathematically true. So yes, right off the bat, first past the post has a tendency to disadvantage the Conservatives in the current layout and environment. And that forces the Conservatives into like these broader, arguably less sustainable coalitions, which kind of have a tendency to fall apart and reform over time. So there's truth to that. Is the second part of the persecution complex is the media out to get us? What do you mean by the media when you make that allegation? Because the sort of people who like to talk about the media and ramble about the media, you mentioned this before, but part of the reason why people's eyes glaze over when you and I actually get into in-depth, informed, and detailed critiques of the media is because they're not looking for that. They're looking for the rumble fucking know-nothing who's going to ramble about the media being out to get us and Stalin's on the march and gratify their anger and their emotional positions on this. Okay, they're not looking for an informed critique of the state of the media. That's not what you're looking for. What you're looking for is me saying, the media is corrupt, man, and they're all left-wing lunatics who are out to take away your freedoms, and you know this because the liberals have been paying them off, man. That's what you're looking for from me. I understand that. I can't give you that because it's not true. And the sort of people who or say it's not true enough, the people who make those kinds of critiques are often the sort of people who would never even be able to define the media if you force them to. Usually what they're talking about when they talk about the media, okay, their version of the media never seems to involve the likes of Rick Bell. Their version of the media never seems to involve the Sun papers. Their version of the media never involves the National Post. So their version of the media is some idea of like some fantasy of the legacy media that doesn't include any of the actual conservative parts of it.
Or talk radio.
Or talk radio.
Yep. AM radio across the country. Yep.
And also, by the way, never seems to include themselves. By the way, guys, all you independent media, the Hub, the Line, the Narwhal, the Tyee, all the Rumble chats, all the YouTubers, whatever, you're all the media too now. And being in the media, you know very well there is no like secret back room where everybody's colluding and everybody's organizing against the Conservatives. That's nonsense. Whatever criticisms you want to lay at the media, and we've laid many. Again, we've laid many. There's no organized conspiracy against you. So, and by the way, actual sophisticated and intelligent campaign operatives and staff in the Conservative Party know this.
They know that. Yeah, I know.
They know that.
And they also know how to network and interface with the media because they understand it.
But they've chosen not to in many cases. And I have to start asking you, as the listeners who are already pissed off at me, okay, here we go. Are you ready for this? All partisan parties hate the media, okay? The Liberals hate us. The NDP hate us. The Conservatives hate us. They should. They ought to. That's correct. It should be an adversarial relationship. But the Conservatives actively cultivate a persecution complex among their followers and among their sort of partisan adjacent media, which there's lots of that too. They actively cultivate a persecution complex. They actively try to run against the media. They've done that as a strategic choice. Okay, that isn't something that they were forced to do because the media was so mean to them and them alone, because that's bullshit. That is something that they have chosen to do as a strategy. Why have they chosen to do that, Matt? Because the persecution complex does two things for them. One, it gins up anger, which is very effective at channeling fundraising and votes.
Yep. Media will never give us a fair shake. Donate $10
Media will
today.
never give us a fair shake. Go listen to our partisan adjacent media instead. Media will never give us a fair shake. We need to come to you directly.
Go to our YouTube channel, get the real story, and donate $10 today because the media wants to shut us down. Yep.
That's right. And by the way, I need to point this out. This is an industry. Politics is an industry, guys, which means that when you get that fundraising email from the Conservatives or the Liberals or the NDP or whatever, they have field tested that messaging. They are getting real-time feedback on open rates and response rates. They're getting real-time feedback on your conversion rates. So they know exactly what words, what language, what framing. They're A/B testing these messages.
Yeah, the message you're getting is not the same that your neighbor might be getting because they want to see which one donates more.
And they're micro-targeting these donations according to your riding to figure out what messaging is working best in what riding and in what places and in what socio-demographic breakdowns. And then they're getting all of this information laid out in a TPS report that they get real-time updates on so that they can adjust and tweak their messaging according to demographics, according to location, according to message signals, and according to language. The persecution complex that they are cultivating is part of an industry that they are using to make money, to make fundraising goals, to meet their fundraising goals. And those, like, it's corporate, guys. It's an industry. And I don't know how to get this across to people without them realizing that, how should I say this? I don't want people to feel like they've been marks because, like, bluntly, all of the parties do this. The Conservatives aren't unique in this. The Liberals do this. The NDP do this. And they're all targeting slightly different audience bases. But, like, it's marketing. It's marketing. They've chosen to cultivate a persecution complex because it is effective marketing. And I'm not saying that you should not be angry about the state of the country. I mean, Matt and I are angry all the time now. We're so angry, okay? I'm not saying that even necessarily the messaging that they're putting out is wrong or incorrect or lies. That's not even true at all sometimes. I'm making this point so that you, my reader, whom I have a duty to, can make an informed decision about how you're choosing to expend your emotional energy. And whether or not you are expending that emotional energy in ways that serve you, or if you are allowing yourself to be hijacked by a persecution complex against a they that the people who are manipulating you can't even define. That's the point I'm trying to make here. And the second reason why the Conservatives, in particular, really go out of their way to cultivate this persecution complex, and beyond the fact that it is demonstrably lucrative and effective for them, is that it absolves them from blame when they lose.
Yeah.
They can lose, and they don't have to take responsibility
they
for their
didn't lose.
messaging.
The media stole it from them.
They don't have to take responsibility for their failure to pivot. They don't have to take responsibility for the unpopularity of their messaging. They don't have to take even responsibility for the own internecine battles that are happening inside their own party. They can just say, media took it from us, man. The media's out to get us.
We're never going to be able to get our
incredible,
perfect campaign through the media.
And this is why all of the Conservatives who are hitting you and me up, claiming that they're running a perfect campaign, which, by the way, oh my God, can we begin to describe the delusion of that? You're running a perfect you've blown a 25-point lead, but you're running a perfect campaign, are you? Okay, well, it would be perfect except the media. It would be perfect except the polls. It would be perfect except for the systemic issues we have around vote inefficiency. It's perfect except for that. Except for the fact that we fucking lost it. It's great. You're running a great job. The persecution complex is a lucrative, it's effective, it's a tool, but it also allows the people who are running things to absolve themselves of blame for failure. That is what it is. And that's where I'm just losing my fucking mind with these people. That's why I'm popping off. This last thing I wanted to talk about here is there's something inherently conspiratorial.
Moving on to segment 3 of Jen unburdening herself.
3.58. There's something inherently conspiratorial. And whether or not this conspiratorialness is the result of the sort of nation conspiratorialism of the society, or whether or not the Conservatives are feeding into it and fostering it, I mean, that's a chicken and egg problem. But when you divide the world between it's us and they, it's they are out to get us. The globalists, the WAF, the media, the elites. By the way, none of the people making those arguments can define any of those terms.
Well, there's one item you left off that list, and all the trains end there eventually. You didn't mention the Jews.
Oh, it'll get there. Just
I know.
wait.
Yeah, that's where the train always goes.
That's where the train always ends, guys. And the problem that you have with these guys is, and I feel like I've been making this argument. I made this argument with Kenny. I feel like I've made this argument with Danielle Smith. You know, you get eaten by the dragon you ride. And it seems to me like conservatives just can't seem to learn this lesson. And that is, you can get people ginned up on a persecution complex. You can get people ginned up on conspiracism. And that might even get you to a place where you can win. But how the fuck are you going to govern when you get there? Because the second you actually win, you become the they. So how do you keep people satisfied who you've already basically turned against the institutions that you've taken over? I've never seen a conservative successfully do it. I've never seen a conservative manage to successfully and sustainably win on a conspiratorial ticket or win on a persecution ticket and then successfully govern from that place. I've just never seen it. They all seem to botch it. Kenny did this. Kenny ran on a conspiratorial ticket that did successfully join the Progressive Conservative Party with the Wild Rose Party in the country. But then essentially that same conspiratorial wing, when they realized that, oh shit, this is a guy who's actually a pretty ordinary conservative who's going to govern from the top down like previous conservatives had, they turned on him. I think Danielle's going to run into this problem sooner rather than later. And I think that
she might already be at the outer edges of it.
She might already be at the outer edges of it. And I think Pierre's would fundamentally have to confront that.
Well, I think Pierre ran into that about 2 weeks ago.
I think Pierre probably ran into that about 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
You can win on these people, but you can't govern them, because once you've ginned up people to have fundamental distrust in institutions, you then have to run the institutions. And unless you know how to dismantle and rebuild those institutions into something that's fully functional and trustworthy, which, by the way, I've yet to see any of you successfully do it, they're just going to turn on you eventually too, right? And in the meantime, you've made everything worse, more corrosive, and you've disillusioned people more. It's a non-winning technique. And that brings me to my very last point, which was a direct response to this week we had on an interview with Barry Eichengreen, who might be one of the foremost
it was really good, by the
economic
way. Yeah.
experts.
It was your on-the-line interview on Tuesday. You did great.
Thank you. I'm a kind of a sort of highly intuitive, poorly informed, poorly educated economics nerd, which apparently is very appealing to a certain kind of economics nerd. But anyway, in the end, the first response at the bottom of that comment section, and again, I know I shouldn't respond to like one-off comments, was like, well, the one thing that I'm relieved about is like the economists are always wrong, and so therefore Donald Trump with his pump and dump scheme of the global economy must, by definition, be correct. And I kind of like died inside, because Barry Eichengreen is probably one of the foremost experts on a lot of these issues in the world. And like he sat down and like gave me his time. He's also the guy who my husband sort of cited multiple times in his various economics theses. And I really wanted to just scream into the wind, because guys, like, there is a fundamental difference between skepticism and anti-intellectualism. It is healthy and good to question authority. It is healthy and good for you to be screaming at Matt and I as mainstream media hacks. It is healthy and good for you guys to take the world's foremost economics experts or world foremost experts and say, okay, but are your assumptions right? Are your premises correct? A lot of the economists did get the inflation call wrong. I mean, one of the foremost experts on this was Trevor Tombe here in Canada, a guy whom you and I both like and respect a lot. He got the inflation call wrong, and then wrote about why he got the inflation call wrong.
We interviewed him before and after too, and he was great. He offered up his time, and we had a great conversation about it. We looked at the assumptions, the errors, what he got right.
Absolutely. And like low-level know-nothings like me also kind of suspected that the experts were wrong in inflation before it happened.
That's why we did the first interview.
It's good to be skeptical. It is fundamentally good to be skeptical. But if your skepticism only gets attributed to one type of people and then completely disappears when you're confronted with another type of people, that's not skepticism. If you can be skeptical of Barry Eichengreen, but you can't be skeptical of Donald Trump's global pump and dump scheme, you're not skeptical. You're you're actually worse than a sheeple, because what that tells you is that you can be skeptical at someone who's working in good faith. You will be skeptical of someone who's working in good faith but has made a good faith mistake, but you can't be skeptical in the face of someone who's malicious and bad faith. That makes you worse than a sheeple, because you can't distinguish between the two types of problems. If you're going to be skeptical, if you're going to frame your identity around being a skeptic, you need to be skeptical of everyone. You need to be skeptical of me. You need to be skeptical of Matt. You need to be skeptical of Joe Rogan. You need to be skeptical of Russell Brand. You need to be skeptical of Donald Trump. And you need to be skeptical of Mark Carney. You need to be unfailing in your skepticism and not be willing to allow your tribal affiliations to fundamentally undermine that skepticism. And by the way, that's a really hard, inhuman thing to do. We all fuck up on that. We're all willing to give people the benefit of the doubt when we probably shouldn't. And we're all willing to be selective in our skepticism, at least to some extent. And by the way, I think I'll get into this later, but that's skepticism is a fundamentally different beast than anti-intellectualism. Skepticism is looking at someone's arguments, positions, or evidence and trying to say, but what about this, but what about this, but what about this? And applying that skepticism across the board, across any partisan or tribal affiliations. Anti-intellectualism is just, well, yeah, sure, he's an expert, but, experts are wrong. Anti-intellectualism is about fundamentally refusing to accept the very basis on which we operate as thinking rational human beings. It's saying, well, nothing is knowable, so everything is wrong. And anti-intellectualism is just the stupid person's way of trying to make themselves feel superior to people who are more intelligent and accomplished than they are. Well, I know I couldn't possibly become the leading foremost intellectual expert on economics and the gold standard. But, on the plus side, that all of the economists were wrong about inflation, so therefore I must really be smarter, right? That's what intellectualism is. It's a fundamental different subset than skepticism. And by the way, I think journalists have, for a lot of different reasons, while we're talking about how I can't criticize the media, journalists have kind of fallen on the wrong end of that too. I think that in an era where anti-intellectualism is rampant, and anti-intellectualism, by the way, is a parody of critical thinking. It's not skeptical. In an era when anti-intellectualism is rampant, a lot of journalists have foregone skepticism, ordinary skepticism against institutions, because they don't want to be regarded as anti-intellectual. And I think that they've kind of, a lot of them, not all of them, but some of them definitely have lost their moorings as a result of that. But that being said, like I said, I think you really have to be able to distinguish in yourself what's the difference between being skeptical of someone like Barry Eichengreen, which is legitimate, and what is the difference between rejecting the idea that Barry Eichengreen could have anything useful to tell you because you want to believe Donald Trump is right. There's a fundamental difference between these two things. And if you can't distinguish between these two things, your governance is going to be a fucking disaster. You're not going to be able to have any kind of grounding from which to see or understand the world that you're in or why it's happening. And you're going to make yourself incredibly vulnerable to propaganda. You will lose the ability to function in a world that is awash with propaganda. And I'm not saying that everything that Matt and I say are right. As I said, you should be skeptical of everything that Matt and I say. We're not right about everything. Of course we're not. Human. We're totally human. But I'm not here to try and scam you. I'm not here to run a grift. And
That's my job. That's my part of the operation.
But the fact that I'm willing to piss off our readers and say, no, I think you're wrong, and I think you've got this wrong, and I'm willing to go on a 30, 40-minute rant explaining why I think you've got this wrong, is evidence of that. I have nothing else to say. I'm done.
Well, thanks for tuning in this week. Okay, you've given me a lot to respond to here, and I wish
did any of that make sense? Or did my little freaking manifesto screed written in the back of my daughter's coloring project just come across as crazy as it looks?
Well, thanks for tuning in this week. No, look, I don't think I disagree with anything you said. Boy, this is going to be a darker and deeper podcast than normal, and that's saying a lot for us.
I feel a lot better.
No, and that's good. But the problem is, I don't know if I should respond to this as your journalist and business partner, or if I should respond to this as your friend.
You can go both. Let's divide it out. Is it time for me to get some help? Do I need to cut the coffee?
It's time for you not to go on Twitter anymore, because it does this to you. And I'm like, you're laughing, but I'm not kidding.
I know.
Your personality type is not wired to be mainlining information. And when I see you...
I'm so sad. This stuff on Twitter makes me so sad.
I know. And when I see you snapping at people in the comment section, you're right.
I'm watching people fucking lose it in real time.
I know.
And I want to save them. I want to bring them back, man. And it's like it was a little bit like, you know, QAnon people. There's entire Reddit threads about people who've lost family members.
Yeah, like I lost my brother.
Conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I've read them.
Like I'm trying to do my little part to try and inoculate people so that they don't get lost into these rabbit holes.
I'm not. I'm trying to protect myself. And that's the difference between you and I. And that's where you need to be more like me, which is a weird thing to say on a podcast intended for distribution to tens of thousands of people. But
we don't live on an island, man. Like we're going to lose. We can't just protect ourselves because we live in a society, man.
We don't live in an island, but occasionally we can retreat to our fortresses. And I don't disagree with anything you said, but I've just come to a place emotionally where I've accepted it.
And also just accepted that nothing that I've said is going to change a single person's mind.
No. You know what? No. I
will not have saved a single person with that 40-minute rant. Not a single one.
No, that's true. You haven't saved anybody, but the line has carefully cultivated an audience that eats this stuff up, and we're going to monetize it. And this is where I'm really cynical and dark here, but this is the best line content we've had in months. And
though maybe we shouldn't let me go off Twitter. Apparently it's great for the content machine.
I would rather grow slightly slower and not have you on the verge of tears.
I'm not on the verge of tears. I'm just had too much caffeine this morning.
Yeah, that's what we all say. Some specific replies I want to make, though, other than get the fuck off Twitter. You're not wired for it. When people talk to me about the media, unless it's in extremely abstract and global terms, talking about the media's role in society or economic headwinds the media is facing, I allow that. Almost every other reference to the media tells me you're fucking stupid. And one of the things, and I've written about this before, one of the things that I have found in my career and just my adulthood, I have found it deeply emotionally alienating, is the more I learn about a topic, the more I realize the government is fucking it up. And I think we're in a situation now where you and I know enough about the media to know what's broken with it. And we also know enough about another factor in this equation, which is the media consuming public, which, by the way, is actually a small subset of the public. Yeah. Most of the public is never going to hear about us. Most of the public doesn't care enough. You and I only interface in a public role with maybe 3% of the population. And not even, I don't mean all at once. I just mean we're only ever going to interface with people drawn from about 3 to 5% of the population.
No one's stopping me at the grocery store, man. Like, that is not a thing in my life.
Okay, it actually is weirdly a thing increasingly for me, and I'm sure it happens for you too sometimes.
Sometimes, but it's not like we're not famous.
It's the YouTube visibility that I think is doing it. But
yeah, maybe.
Talking to me about the media 9 times out of 10 tells me that you don't actually know what you're talking about. But it also sends me a separate signal. If you're talking to me about the media, you're emotionally invested. And that's the fucking worst combination. High emotional investment, low knowledge. And what I've just discovered over the years is it's not fucking worth it. You and I wrote years ago public service announcements, PSAs. They're part of the line archive. They're still there. Everything people get wrong about the media. And the reason I wrote them, you edited them. The reason I wrote them is so that I never had to fucking explain this stuff again. Whenever some idiot shows up in my inbox trying to explain to me the way the media works, I can just send them the link. But I'm going to try, for people of good faith who are trying to understand what I'm trying to tell you there, people who talk about the media don't realize that's as stupid as talking about the government. Because the government is millions of people spread across a massive landmass divided into 3 orders of constitutional governance in this country, a federal jurisdiction, 13 subnational jurisdictions, and I don't even know how many municipal governments and then county governments and regional governments. And then you take all of those subdivisions and then you divide them into divisions: sanitation, public safety, accounting. And then you take all of those divisions, then you divide them into teams. And many of the teams are subdivided. You can't talk about it as a thing. It's not a thing. It's a living entity. The media is the same way. And if you don't know that, and you care enough about it to talk to me about it, I instantly conclude it's probably not worth my time to have the conversation, because your emotional investment's too high and your knowledge is too low. So I will give you some polite pat on the butt answer and send you on your way, hopefully feeling better for the experience. But it's not worth it, Jen, and it's not worth getting upset about.
No, it isn't. And I understand. And the other thing that I have about the media is, like, how do I define the media? The media is just citizens trying to explain what's going on to other citizens, man. That's it.
Yeah, but this was one of the other points I wanted to bring up, because I think something fundamentally has changed recently. And I think it explains some of what you're talking about. The media is not new. There's always been some version of the media, whether it was notices nailed to the church door or town criers or the 20th century media forms that people understand, radio, TV, newspapers, magazines. Something new that we're dealing with now is that consumption of media has become a team sport. Social media and online communication tools. Like, if 50 years ago you read an article in a newspaper that really pissed you off, what are you going to do with that anger?
Write a letter to the editor.
Write a letter to the editor, complain to people at your bowling league, talk about it around the water cooler at the office. It didn't go anywhere. And I'm not saying that's better, because maybe some of the time the outrage was genuine and it would have been good for society if it had spread far and wide. Maybe it was a valid, fair point. But now what we live in is an era where consuming the media is a communal event, and the communities are organized online. Reading the news, watching the news, less extent to radio because it's harder to clip. But broadly, consuming the media is now a tribally reinforcing shared social enterprise. And I don't think, and this is one of those media criticisms you and I have made, I don't think the media has understood its evolving role. I don't think we have understood how...
I think you and I have not understood. Because if we had understood, we would have picked a team. We would not be trying to piss off our readers by pointing out to them that they're being silly.
I wouldn't have, because I'm just not wired that way.
And we'd become radically more popular.
Yeah, but I couldn't live that way. I would just quit.
No. Yeah, it wouldn't be worth it to do it.
I'm smart enough and well-connected enough that I can go at a different job doing something else.
At that point, you might as well just join a comms team, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's if I can't
I'd be great at that.
Operate in a space where I can tell you what I think is really going on around you and around me. I mean, I'm not saying that I get it all right or anything like that. I don't. But if I can't operate in a space where I can be honest with you about what's happening, then I might as well just be in comms. If I have to lie for a living, I can make more money in comms.
And tell someone else's lie.
That's fine.
I think one of the things I do want to mention, though, because I got a whole list of responses here for you. I wish I'd kept notes.
Well, and then we should probably talk about the election more, because I do want to talk about the polls stuff. I do want to talk about that a little bit.
I think you were unfairly hard on the conservatives, because the liberals have gone down this path too.
They have.
They do it with a smiley face.
Yeah.
The liberals do it with a smile on their face, and the conservatives do it with anger. But at least on the federal level,
the liberals have been playing more to fear, and the conservatives have been playing more to anger. I think that's a legitimate criticism that you're leveling at me there.
I think one of the things, and this is making its 50th appearance on the Line podcast, the Sully observation that the liberals are the kind of people who'd never believe they would do the thing they're currently doing. Look at the way the Conservative Party and conservative partisans writ large, including the broader orbit, not staffers, but kind of fellow travelers. Look at the way they interface with the media. It's increasingly indistinguishable from how the liberals do, except in tone. And tone matters a little bit, but there is still, the liberals are still using the media for tribal reinforcement.
Yes.
Of the globe is after us again. Fuck Bob Fife. Rally and donate $10 today. Yep. They're also using it in the same way that the liberals, that the conservatives do. And I'm not saying you're wrong about the conservatives. I'm just saying it's bigger than the conservatives.
Agreed. Yes.
Which what the liberals are also doing is they're preemptively isolating themselves from criticism.
Yes.
Because you're building in. And we saw it with Mark Carney this week. One of these things we might actually talk about if we ever talk about the election.
If we ever get around to that.
The whole very, very obvious echoes to the story in the Globe and Mail is false. So I 100% endorse your comments about what the conservatives are doing. I think they're accurate. The liberals are doing it too. They're just doing it slightly differently. One of the things, though, that you talked about, and this is me kind of just running down the checklist of things I wanted to respond to. You talked about the problems in governance when you can tap outrage and you can ride that into office, or in Poilievre's case, maybe near to getting into office before it all fucking collapses. I think some of your comments, and this is helpful criticism, but it's also going to make you even more depressed.
Oh.
I think you're making the mistake of thinking that some of these problems are imminent as opposed to present. Because, and this is why I wanted to make the point of the liberals being guilty of this in their own way.
Yeah, the liberals of governance has also been shit.
Correct.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think is contributing to this is, well, two things. First of all, political parties are over-optimized for communication battles and not properly optimized for governance.
Correct.
So you win an election with your team of social media experts, but no one knows how the payroll system works.
You have a high degree of deliverology in terms of the feedback loops on your fundraising emails, but no deliverology in terms of
running a 41 million person federal federation. Yep.
That one.
And I think I think that's part of the problem. We've probably, and you were touching on this when you were talking about politics as an industry. We probably have, in terms of their skill as politicians, I don't know if we've ever had better politicians. Like, these people are absolutely fucking fantastic at politics. We have never had more optimized, well-funded, well-trained, and well-resourced politicians. And the country, and this is broadly true across the West, is falling apart. Basic services no longer function. But holy fuck, can they ever respond with a rapid response messaging plan when someone bangs the wrong intern or something, right? Like, that's what they're good at, and they're really good at it. Can you get a hip replacement? No. And I think the other part of this that is corroding governance is the tribal part of it. Because Justin Trudeau, the former prime minister, was not a stupid man. And I know a lot of people think he's stupid. He's not. He's actually quite intelligent. The people around him, really fucking smart people. The quality was not the gray matter. It was the inputs coming in. And you were talking a little bit, again, about the Conservatives having a bit of a fever going on intellectually. Justin Trudeau's government never emotionally recovered from the near-death experience of blackface and brownface in 2019. And one of the things
I would add the SNC scandal to that particular list.
One of the things that changed in them was their ability to perceive danger signs and differentiate them from unfair assholes on Twitter or fuck Trudeau nobodies or hostile National Post columnists. Everything became coded to them as unfair attack. Nothing was coded to them as cockpit warning light urgently blinking because engine oil pressure is dropping. It was all just fuck Trudeau flags to them.
Yeah.
And the Conservatives will repeat that process. If
already
I don't
repeating the process.
Whenever they next form government, it's going to be the same.
But they're already repeating that process
right now.
When they're not in government.
Yeah, I know.
Like, they're already engaging the same sort of highly insular, bunker-bound, whatever. I mean, we talked about Corey Teneycke going on a rant about the Conservatives' campaign. Corey Teneycke is of course, Doug Ford's campaign manager.
Yeah.
He used to be in the federal conservative tent. He's clearly out of it. And instead of actually responding to his criticisms and being like, yeah, he's clearly right, we're clearly losing Ontario by significant numbers, instead it became shoot the messenger, Teneycke's the baddie, doesn't he know that he has an obligation to try and unify the team? He's only out in it for himself. Doug Ford wants to replace Pierre. We can ignore everything that he says. And by the way, don't you know that we're running a perfect campaign?
I think the last point I would offer, first of all, yes. And there's liberal versions of that too.
Oh, the Liberals do exactly the same thing.
They're better at it now than they used to be. I still think there's enough trauma from the 03 feud or leading up to 03 feud that they're a little more disciplined.
Basically, my big theory of politics right now is that it's all cult of personality.
Yes.
But essentially the only thing that distinguishes a partisan party from an actual honest-to-God doomsday cult are some kind of democratic norms, guardrails, and expectations of limited power against the leader.
Yeah, but less and less. And less and less. And this is why, Jen, I'm telling you to stop yelling at people in the comments and come build a fucking fortress with me. And again, this is unusual podcast material here. This is probably a conversation I would have rather have off the air, so to speak. But I don't think we can stop this. And it's getting stupider. And it's getting stupider. And this is the thing. The last point that I flagged here was the anti-intellectual part of it. The most dangerous people in the world are not the 5 out of 10s for intelligence or the 6 out of 10s or the 7s or the 8s or the 9s, or even the 10s. The most dangerous people in the world are the 7s who think they're 9s.
Which are probably us, by the way. So we're totally bullshit.
We could be very dangerous.
We wouldn't know.
You know what? I think I'm an 8, and I think I'm an 8. I think I'm pretty fucking intelligent, but I'm also smart enough to go, I don't know what the fuck this is, so I'm going to go interview someone who knows about it. Like, I understand that my role sometimes is not to tell people I know what I'm talking about. It's to go find someone who knows what they're talking about and then use my skills, which is asking questions and hopefully keeping things conversational, to bring good information to people.
I don't think you can function appropriately as a journalist from an anti-intellectual mindset.
It's incompatible with the role.
It's incompatible with the role.
Yes. But also, one of the things that I have simply concluded as a journalist, as just a random human being, as a husband, as a dad, as a brother, as a son, whatever, is that I'm going to quote Spaceballs. I knew it. I'm surrounded by assholes. In the last 10 or 20 years, people I know to have all the cognitive ability they need to be intelligent. They are gifted with cognition. I've watched a bunch of them turn into fucking morons. And it's their information diet. No one likes to receive information that challenges them. When I get up in the morning, I want to read nothing but confirmation of all the things I went to bed believing. Everybody does. And we have designed a society that makes that possible. And even people who don't realize it's happening to them, it's happening to them. Because in the background, and like I said a few minutes ago, information consumption has become a tribal, shared, communal experience now. What I didn't mention before is that it's increasingly driven by algorithms that are invisible to us. There's a woman I know, and I'm not going to name while we're rolling. I'll tell you who I mean after. You probably know her too. She's very smart. She's very good at her job. And she consistently does not fucking understand that her Twitter experience is not real life. And I don't know how else to explain it to her. And I've just given up.
Is it me?
No.
Is that me?
No, I'll tell you who it is, but it's not you. And this is someone who is consistently shocked by events because her online Twitter experience is not aligning with reality.
Blue sky experience, but whatever. Yeah.
And the reason for that is because thousands, maybe by this point, millions of individual user input decisions she has made on Twitter. People she have blocked, people she has followed, stuff she has muted, stuff she has retweeted, stuff she has liked, stuff that she's clicked on, stuff that she has not clicked on. The algorithms now have thousands, potentially millions of data points. And Twitter's algorithm, Facebook's algorithm, Instagram's algorithm, in a very amoral way, are not designed necessarily to lead anyone to any specific conclusion. And I do understand that increasingly we may be moving into an era where people are putting their thumbs on the scale to lead people to specific conclusions. But in the platonic idea of social media, all it's trying to do is hold your attention. Because the longer you're on the site, the more ads it can show you and the more revenue it makes. So we have all created our own information universes. I've made this joke to you before. I get up in the morning and it's like the first thing I see on my Google homepage is curated news stories that it thinks I'm going to be interested in. Most people might not realize that that reflects Google's accumulated knowledge of me. And they might go, well, here are the top stories today, without ever realizing that it's not the top stories that have been selected by human beings with editorial judgment and experience. It's been determined by the fact that I click on Star Trek, Toronto Maple Leafs, rock music, links. So I wake up in the morning.
Reflection of the self.
I wake up in the morning and Google's telling me, hey, new Star Trek show has been approved. Leafs win nail-biter in overtime.
I guarantee you that is not my information environment.
But you probably, unlike most people, probably know that that is the case.
Yes. Now, there's one final point I want to make here, and then I swear to God we will go back to talking about the goddamn election. And that is part of the research that I'm doing for this book that apparently I can never finish is looking at cults, for example, and how cults function. And one of the things that's fascinating when you talk to really intelligent people is they're very convinced that they could never fall for a cult because they look at the doctrines of any particular cult and they say, well, that's obviously stupid. And I'm smart. So therefore, I could never fall for a stupid thing like that. And then you actually start looking at who does fall for cults. And you find engineers, you find doctors,
lawyers.
You find really, really intelligent people. Not only are they sucked into cults almost at a disproportionately high rate, but the cults target smart people.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because smart people often live and work in environments that neglect their emotional needs, and so therefore they're emotionally vulnerable.
Oh, it's like it's journalists are on the list too.
Yeah, pretty much. And then the other thing that tends to happen with cults is the smarter you are, the better your imagination is, the more you can twist and argue with yourself and rationalize the irrational. Mm-hmm. Right? Like this is the fundamental problem. And this is how very intelligent people are disproportionately sucked into cults. And I think that is relevant when we're talking about partisan politics, because I think partisan politics are just cults with guardrails.
Oh, Jen, if through the magic of audio and video editing, we went through your last minute there and we snipped out every time you said cult and we just dropped in politics, every sentence would work. Like you just described three broad professions: engineers, doctors, lawyers.
Yeah. You
want to know what other field those three guys are overrepresented in?
Not bowling leagues.
Elected office.
Like I'm saying if you have an ordinary IQ, you're probably, and you have like a bowling league and you have a happy family life, you're probably less vulnerable to the cognitive distortions of extreme fringe religious movements and partisan politics.
Because your emotional and intellectual needs are met. Yeah. No, look, something that I was flirting with saying, and I wasn't going to, but now I will because you've led us there. This ties back a little bit to what you were saying about the conservatives. And I agree with all of it, even though I do think we need to lump the liberals in a bit. And
I think the liberals are definitely a little on the cult of personality, fucking lunatic, crazy partisan. I lump them in pretty strongly into this category here.
And I had a fascinating conversation once, and there's a non-zero chance the person I had it with is going to hear it as I relay the story right now. But someone I knew personally who went into politics, and over a period of a couple of years, I went from a valued friend to a hated enemy. And it wasn't because our personal relationship had changed, but it was because I was not in the system. I was a hostile critic of the system. And then that person eventually left politics. Was never elected. They were in a staffing role. And after about a year, I heard from them, and they said to me, "What the fuck happened to me?"
It's deprogramming.
Yeah.
They go through a deprogramming process when they leave the cult.
And in the one of the things you were saying when we were talking about the conservatives is they were talking about how the conservatives are basically in the bunker right now. And I think that's true of some of them. But I also think there are some inside right now who see exactly what's happening, and they're terrified and confused by it. And what I've been trying to tell them is basically what you've been saying. There are, I'm not going to name names here, but there are partisans I know, elected and staff, who right now I would define as insane, who are no longer connected in a meaningful way to reality.
Consensus reality.
Because they are completely velocitized by the campaign and they don't know it.
Yeah.
You know that thing we've talked about before. Sometimes rookie pilots are upside down in the planes and they don't know it.
Yeah.
Because their senses are lying to them.
Well, and also, I don't want to pretend to be better than this, because if I were in their position, I'd probably be exactly the same. I'd probably be worse. This is why I can't never go into politics. I'd be bad at it. So right now, there are people who I am not talking to, not because I'm being a dick about it, but I'm going to talk to them in a few months. They're not worth my time talking to right now. And these are people I know and I like. But right now, they're crazy people. And I'm thinking of conservatives and liberals. They are so fucking pumped up on rah team that you cannot speak to them as human beings. It doesn't matter how many years I've known them. It doesn't matter how well I know their kids. It doesn't matter how well I know their spouses. It doesn't matter the things we've talked about, the things we've gone through. Right now, these people cannot commune with me as a human being. And that's fine. There are people inside both parties, though, and I've spoken to senior conservatives and liberals this week, who are still pretty normal. They get it. On that note, I do feel like we have to put a like and subscribe there, not only because we have been ranting for an hour and 10 minutes, but also because I've clicked on my...
Disconnected your microphone.
I've disconnected my mic. So by accident, in my agitation state, I'm now using a fidget. I'm using slime. Anyway, we are going to talk about the campaign. I do want to talk about Carney in China. I do want to talk about, do you believe the polls? And I think we have a few other little things to note, but I think we should put a like and subscribe there and encourage people to allow us, if you pay for us at www.readtheline, you can leave a comment, and there is a non-zero chance that I will yell at you in that comment section. So, I mean, the benefits of paid subscribership really do abound here at The Line. Do check us out at www.readtheline.ca.
This message is brought to you by TikTok Canada. How do we strengthen Canada's economy for the future? We can start by preserving the jobs and local investments we already have. For the last 5 years, TikTok has been investing in Canada, hiring hundreds of employees for well-paying jobs in Toronto and Vancouver, and contributing over $1.4 billion in GDP to Canada's economy through its day-to-day operations. However, TikTok has been ordered to shut down its Canadian operations, closing these offices, laying off these employees, and setting a chilling precedent for global companies considering investing in Canada. These are jobs in areas like software development and ad sales, which create opportunities for Canadians to work in global tech while staying right here at home. It is in Canada's best interest to find a way forward that keeps local teams in place to support the success of Canadian creators, artists, and small businesses on the platform. Whichever party forms government, it will have an opportunity to demonstrate that we're open for business while addressing security concerns and fostering a thriving tech sector. Facts matter. Shutting down TikTok Canada eliminates jobs and stymies investments in Canada. Let's find a solution for TikTok that makes sense for Canadians.
All right, so Matt, I have taken a deep breath. I've brushed my hair. I've calmed down. I've stopped drinking the caffeine. You know, Fridays I sometimes treat myself to a Starbucks. That's a mistake. We talk about I'm not wired for Twitter. I'm not
Starbucks
wired
is your
for
problem.
caffeine.
Yeah.
Okay.
New sponsorship idea. Herbal teas.
Got vitamin water going on now. Okay.
I want to. So first of all, while we were taking our break there, while Jen pulled herself together, I was giggling to myself. Normally that's bad. Normally when I'm giggling to myself, someone's about to get hurt or something. But this time I was giggling in genuine amusement, because let me just say that the Line is incredibly grateful for all of our advertising partners. Like our commercial partners here at the Line are a huge part of how we're growing the business, and they're a huge part of our plans for the future. And 99% of the time, they know what they're going to get. They get a very regular, predictable product.
Oops. Get what you get, man.
Yeah.
It's a gamble.
Today, guys in the C-suites of our advertising partners are listening to Jen at around like the 50-second minute mark. And they're going, what the fuck did we sponsor? So I just want to reiterate a very special thank you to all of our commercial partners. I want to lighten
and we'll
the
be
mood.
taking a week off after this.
Yes.
Thanks to your sponsorship.
The Line podcast will be back next week with Matt Gurney. I want to lighten the mood just for a moment, because that was pretty heavy, before we talk about the election, which might be heavy. I am a lifelong fan of Leslie Nielsen style spoof movies, The Naked Gun in particular. And in one of my group chats with my friends, we're always kind of observing to each other the little absurdities of life that would make it into a Naked Gun movie. Do you want to know something that happened to me this week?
Yeah, totally.
In the third segment, I'm going to talk about a breakfast meeting I was at downtown in Toronto early this week. After the meeting, I had to run because I had a family commitment. But there is a bagel place that I know and really, really like that is nearby.
Is it the 24-hour bagel place in Toronto?
No, but by the time the meeting I was in was over, it was about 9 a.m. Mm-hmm. So, and this is relevant to the story. When I got there, it was open, but it had just opened. And there was one customer who got there ahead of me, and he ordered a dozen fresh bagels, and he got his dozen fresh bagels and he left. And I was the second customer of the day, and I ordered, because people are really excited to know this, I ordered a toasted sesame cream cheese and lox with capers and onions. Perfect way to start the day. And I was the second customer of the day, and the woman at the cash gave me the little slip that said number 2. And I went, so I paid, and I went over to stand at the where the bagels actually get made. And I want to reiterate to everybody, there were no other people. I was the second customer of the day. And the woman finishes my bagel and then wraps it and then walks over to the side. And I'm thinking she's going to hand me my bagel. Instead, she goes, number 2. Number 2. And I look behind me and I'm like, is someone else in here now? No, it was me. And instead of saying, here's your fucking bagel, she started calling my ticket number. Why? What the fuck? I don't think you are as taken with the spirit of this moment as I thought you would be. But
I thought there was going to be a punchline, though. Like, I'm waiting for a punchline.
No, the punchline is her staring at the only other person in the store and calling his number instead of just saying, here's your bagel.
That just seems to me like someone who's kind of on autopilot.
That's maybe a charitable way of putting it. Struck me as someone who's crazy. The
I
bagel,
don't know,
though, is excellent.
retail, man. Retail's hard. Have you worked retail?
Have I worked retail? Yeah, Jen, I worked a lot of retail. Oh,
I
my
did.
first job was national columnist.
Yeah, well, my first job was Starbucks at
Yeah.
16 in the back of an Indigo. So I've worked a lot of retail, and let me tell you, you get into autopilot, you zone out.
Have you ever stared at the only person there and called out a number?
No, but I've had boomer women castigate me for like making the worst latte they'd ever experienced and wanted to really make sure that I knew that.
Is this where your boomer hatred started?
Probably. This is
Yeah,
probably
okay.
where it started. Well,
So
I mean,
do
I'm not going to be a jerk about this because not all boomers. I get it. Not all boomers. But if you had a really terrible person, like a really awful human being who just was a nasty piece of work, who really felt like the way to function in the world was to chew out a 16-year-old working at Starbucks, like that kind of a human being, they were always boomer women. Always, without exception.
Okay.
Like
Well,
I never had those experiences with younger women. I never had those experiences with older women, and I never had those experiences with men. Just saying.
I think certain line columns suddenly make sense in a profound way that maybe they didn't before. All right. Election. So let's actually talk about that. So you and I talked about the election in sort of more abstract way in the first segment, but actually talking about the campaign that was this week. And this is something we noted at some length in our bullshit bulletin published Friday morning. Encourage everybody to go check that out and see Jen ripping
People
the heads
either
off.
really like it or really hate it.
Yeah. Jen just decapitates commenter after commenter.
Paid commenter after paid commenter. I'm a businesswoman. I'm smart. I'm gonna be back working at Starbucks soon. It's gonna be great.
Like I said, the Line Podcast with Matt Gurney will be back in 1 week. I thought this week was interesting. And up to now, this election has been, it felt a little bit like, to me, a Potemkin election. Not a lot happening. I finally had one door knocker. I ignored it. And I've seen a few more signs pop up in the neighborhood. But we talked about this last week.
I make my husband take the door knockers and he starts debating with them for like an hour. It's like a 419 scam. It's great. It's amazing.
No, I just politely ignore them. Something happened this week, though, that made me for the first time go, oh, interesting.
Okay.
Carney and Polyev have both palpably fucked up in interesting ways. And I don't think electorally significant ways necessarily. I don't know if any votes are going to move, but we talked about both these issues in the bullshit bulletin. Carney and a completely bullshit promise on guns. Everybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, go read the bullshit bulletin. I literally copy and pasted something right out of the Firearms Act. The Liberal leader should read it. His dismissive reaction to the Globe and Mail. I think we've spent an hour on the media already, so we don't need to do that. But that struck me as tactically unwise. I think the Liberals are ignoring real problems they have rather than ask themselves.
On Chinese interference.
The most charitable possible explanation for what's happening with the Liberals right now is that the GTA apparatus of the Federal Liberal Party, the Liberal Party of Canada's GTA chapters, have a fucking problem. And you remember, as I do, when Justin Trudeau began to get in trouble on this a couple of years ago, his first default was to lecture us about anti-Asian racism. To my Liberal friends who have somehow hung on through the first segment and are still listening, you guys came to regret that. You're doing it again. I don't know if you're smart enough to figure that out.
I don't understand in my head how you get a candidate, by the way, who's a pretty nothing special candidate, make threats and encourage people to turn in his conservative counterpart to the Chinese consulate for bounty. Carney not immediately shoot him from orbit. Eventually he resigns, and then he now gets replaced by another candidate for whom there is now evidence of him, singing nationalist Chinese party songs in uniform, I believe. Am I wrong about that?
I don't know, but I do.
The
replacement candidate of the guy who's overly close to the Chinese regime is a guy who's overly close to the Chinese regime.
Yeah. I mean, this isn't the. I'm sorry, what? There are many, many Chinese Canadians who could sit in that riding, who are probably not overly close to the Chinese regime.
The Liberals have a problem in their greater
have a
Toronto
problem.
establishment that they're not talking about. And they'd
have a
rather yell
problem.
at us about being racist or yell at the Globe. At a certain point, and Jen, I'm so mindful of everything we just talked about in the first segment here. You know me, I'm not a conspiracy monger. But the Liberals are making it very difficult to continue giving them the benefit of the doubt. And the Conservatives have proven stubbornly incurious about Indian interference operations in their operations, and the Liberals are right to call that out. The Liberals are proving stubbornly incurious about the extent of Chinese interference in their operations, particularly in Vancouver and the GTA, and the Conservatives are right to call that out. I wish I lived in a country where you could do both at once.
Well, no, but I even think that risks falling into a false balance conversation. I think it's perfectly fine to call the Conservatives out for some of the Indian interference, but so far the evidence around the Indian interference, while it's there and there is evidence of there being some, it's not very pervasive. What we're seeing about Chinese interference in the Liberals is now getting to be creepy.
Like I said, I'm running out of charitable explanations.
I don't think that this is an equivalent problem in these two parties. I think that the problem is much worse.
Right?
Yeah, well, the way that the Liberals are behaving, and if we were to draw our conclusions solely by their own behavior, Chinese interference is a much more significant problem in the Conservatives than is Indian interference in the Conservatives. Again, do I have perfect information on that? Of course I don't. Of course I don't. I can only ascertain that by the behavior of the parties. If I were to only ascertain that according to the behavior, the Liberal behavior on this file is way weirder. Way weirder.
I can't explain it.
I can't explain it.
I can't explain it in a way that does not go down some dark paths.
Yes.
And I don't... Something a campaigner told me once, an experienced election campaigner said to me, what most people don't understand, and hey, it was news to me, was that maybe only 30 or 40 candidates get like an actual proper thorough vetting.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else fills out a form and like an intern at Party HQ looks it over. But you only really vet the candidates in the ridings you think you have a chance of flipping or where you're worried about holding it. And each party has very limited actual paths to victory. The Conservatives went into this election with just under 120 seats. Their best case scenario realistically, and that number is dropping, but there's probably 50, 75 they actually paid attention to and properly vetting the candidates. The Liberals, I don't even know what the number would be. There's something wrong with the Liberals here. And I'm not saying that Carney is an agent or some bullshit like that. But I think this relates a little bit to what we were talking about in the first segment here, where the Trudeau-era Liberals got to a point where they could not tell the difference between a blinking engine light warning indicator and a fuck Trudeau flag. And I have seen from the Carney people a willingness to recognize mistakes. And I think it's obvious in the campaign and in the policies that they are trying to move the party away from some of the positions that they had under Trudeau. My advice to them, nickel's worth of free advice. You want to change how the Liberals handled that stuff too. And Carney's not doing it. The answers we're getting are insufficient. They're just not good enough.
The behaviors are insufficient, or are suspect, and the answers are insufficient. I think that's would be my conclusion. And I would say, do I think that Carney personally is some kind of agent of the Chinese? I don't think there's enough evidence to take me to that conclusion. I do think there's enough evidence right now to take me to the conclusion that there's something fishy going on in terms of the internal party apparatus.
Particularly in the Greater Toronto area. Yeah.
And that Carney is either not responding appropriately to that or is insulated from that particular problem. I would also give Carney something of a benefit of the doubt. This is a guy who hasn't been in the party apparatus for a long time, and he's been out of the country for a long time. And you see that in many of his gaffes, right? Like he's consistently made sort of weird dude who hasn't lived here in a long time.
Yeah, he wants to go campaign outside Eaton's.
Yeah, right. That's those kinds of errors. And I suspect that what might be happening here is there are problems in terms of the party's internal apparatus and internal functioning, and you have Carney, who, because he's in politics, is already insulated from external dissent and already highly insulated from criticism. And the people whom he is surrounded with, which, by the way, are almost exclusively all Trudeau people, so it's the same tribe that he's surrounded himself with, are telling him, don't worry about it. This is just a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorist conservatives. This isn't a problem. That's kind of what I suspect is happening.
Is it a blinking engine light or is it a fuck Trudeau flag? They can't tell the difference.
They can't tell the difference. That's right. So, I mean, this is one of the major downsides when you have somebody who doesn't have a lot of experience in politics. He has to rely on the people he's chosen to surround himself with. He's surrounded himself with some people who are very smart and very good, but they're all still fundamentally the same partisan cult. So they still have the same partisan cult problems. Look, if there's one advice that I would give to Mark Carney if he wins this thing, and it's looking like he will, you need to fire these people. You need to clear house. Like, I'm sorry, you need to clear house. You need a new cabinet, and you need new staff. You cannot have this be the Trudeau team with a Carney face. You will fail. You will fail at this if you do that. You need to get new people around you.
I'm going to keep my powder dry on that one because that is not a column I'm already starting to write, but it is adjacent to a column I'm starting to write. Go. So I'll save it on that. I want to talk a little bit about the Conservatives as well. And I think we covered a lot of this in Jen's first segment, emotional and
psychological breakdown.
Yeah, I mean, that's not how I describe it, but yes. And we covered a lot of it in the Bullshit Bulletin as well. But I think to the points you and I have been talking about in the Bullshit Bulletin and in the first segment, the Conservative Party, and I have had many criticisms of the campaign they've been running, and I think belatedly they have started to address them. Late in the week,
the perfect campaign that they've been running.
Late in the week, this week was the first time they started to feel like losers to me. And I don't mean in the sense of moral judgment. Oh, look at these jerks. I mean it more in the sense they were starting to behave the way a party behaves when it's about to lose. And I think that's wrong because there is a possibility that the debates which are coming up are going to be unusually significant in this campaign because Carney will be an unknown quantity. Now, that's going to be offset by, I don't know how much in the modern media environment anyone will watch the debates. I don't know. This could go either way. I can write equally plausible narratives here that the Conservatives are about to start a major recovery or that they're dead. And they're starting to run out of time. I mentioned it in the Bullshit Bulletin. Poilievre snarking Judy Trin of CTV, calling her a protester when she shouted a question. That's a loser move.
I would also say that weird exchange that he had with Laura Stone was a loser move. That was creepy as hell. Like, I don't think he was trying to be creepy. I think he was actually trying to do the thing where a guy who's kind of naturally smarmy and aggressive was trying really hard to be pleasant and fun. And it just didn't. It's like me trying to come across as pleasant and fun.
Or me. Yeah. Well,
it's not natural.
I recognize elements of my own personality in some of these problems.
I am. Yeah, that's fair. But it didn't. It just came across as really cringy and creepy, and it really did. And he must know that. Like, he must know that.
The columnist's imperative is to take something small and to make it big because we have 1,000 words to file. We have bills to pay. What does this small campaign event tell us about the state of Canadian democracy? I'm actually going to lean the opposite direction here. I think we can explain some of what I've been seeing from both Carney and Poilievre this week very simply. I think they're tired.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right. And also, maybe we should explain that a little bit for anybody who hasn't seen these clips. There were two kind of weird media clips from Pierre this week. One was the one where he went to Judy Trin, who was a reporter. Was she CTV? I think she's CTV, right?
CTV does.
And she yelled out a question, and essentially he called her a protester or something.
He said, "Oh, right? Excuse me, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you. There's protesters yelling." Yeah.
Okay, so that's probably just I don't read very much into that, frankly.
Just a weird dick loser thing to do.
Well, unless he didn't quite hear who the question was coming from. I mean, whatever. The one that I think really was a small thing, but actually could have an impact was Laura Stone was asking about his rally. He did this huge rally in Edmonton, something like 10 to 15,000 people showed up. Debate about whether or not it was the largest rally in Canada, which, I mean, sure, whatever. And Laura was like, well, look, you guys are really focusing on this rally strategy. But essentially her question is, are you just speaking to the converted? Are you just getting people who are already on board with this? And is the language you're using around things like the Century Initiative, for example? I mean, normies have no idea what you're talking about. This is jargon for the cult, so to speak. Laura was much more polite in the way that she phrased it than I was just there. And like, Pierre tried to do the thing that he frequently does with media where he deflects the question by turning the question back on her. So rather than answer her question about whether or not he was speaking to the converted, instead he started to say, well, how big was that rally? How you tell me, how big was the rally? Like he was trying to get her to answer the question about how big the rally was and how successful the rally was, which can be a bit of effective rhetorical jujitsu. And he's used that tactic before. It can be a smart way of deflecting a question to turn a question back on a reporter.
Yep. We wrote a whole article about a year or two ago about how the press corps was not adapting to the fact that if you showed up and asked vague, lazy, bloated questions, his strategy, we wrote about this, was to go, well, who said that? Don't tell me that people are saying, tell me who.
But in this case, it was a bit of a bloated question, but it wasn't a vague or a lazy one. And he kind of did it with this kind of oleaginous kind of grin, like, and how was that the size of that crowd, Laura? Like it came across as almost it did almost come across as vaguely sexual, although I don't think that was his intention at all.
I don't think it was that vague. I watched it. I don't think it was that vague.
Yeah, it was creepy. And like that being said, I think that Pierre obviously has an issue around women and female voters. I think most conservatives do. Women tend not to vote conservative in the same numbers that men do, if there's a whole bunch of cultural reasons for that. And I would also say, like, I don't think that Pierre is bad with women in terms of his, like in terms of how he is in terms of professionally or personally. You know, he has a good, healthy relationship with his wife, and his wife is pretty awesome. Like, she's pretty baller. So, like, I don't think he's a creep, is what I'm saying here. I don't think that that's the case. But in this particular moment, it came off as creepy. Was that just because he was maybe high on his own supply after doing these rallies and was amped up? Was this because he was actually trying to be pleasant and fun while turning this question back on her using that rhetorical trick? Or was he just tired? I'm not sure it really matters. The point is, a lot of women, this is a small thing, but a lot of women are going to listen to that clip and go, ooh, ooh. I mean, I know I went, ooh, when I listened to it. So,
yeah.
Anyway, there's that. And then the other...
But I still think the possible really easy explanation is that they've hit the time in the race where they've been campaigning too long. And the campaign teams for both of them should build in a quiet evening in a hotel room with a proper meal and an early bedtime and try to have their spouses with them.
Yeah. And not talk about politics. The other one that came up is that I think at the last rally in Brampton, the "Do you believe the polls" movement has started. There were people who showed up with T-shirts and signs that read, "Do you believe the polls?" And there's a couple ways to interpret this. One is that you have a group of people, either in a semi-organized or unofficial capacity, I don't know which, are trying to rally conservative supporters and voters to not lose hope, not have morale break. They're trying to say, don't worry about the polls, don't believe the polls, focus and fixate on the job we need to do at hand, which is, by the way, the correct message. That is absolutely the message that you should want coming from the campaign. You don't want a campaign at this juncture, we're still 17 days away from E-Day. You don't want the campaign messaging defeat signals. You want them messaging aggressive, there's still hope, there's still opportunity. Don't get demoralized, don't get deflated. So that is fine. And I would also say as well, like, and this is as someone who's married to a pollster, I don't necessarily spend a lot of time fixating on polls. And I have fundamental questions about the role of polling in democracy and whether or not we should be treating these races as horse races. I think polling has fundamentally altered the way we cover election races. And polling can be used in a really manipulative way to sway outcomes and is used in a manipulative way to sway outcomes in some cases. So I'm on the fence on that one. But the other part of me also goes, and part of this is just, again, the conservatives engaging in their usual persecution complex / conspiracist. All of the pollsters are engaged in a conspiracy to get us. And I'm like, yeah, but they weren't engaged in that conspiracy to get you like 6 months ago.
2 months ago.
When you were riding high in them. Now were they? Like, all of this these persecution complexes, all of this victimhood complex has to be explained in the context of the fact that you blew a 20-plus point lead that you had managed to sustain for more than a year. Yeah. If all the media is against you and all the polls are lying to you and everybody, all the institutions are making it impossible for you to win, then how come you were winning 5 minutes ago? And if we'd had this election in December of last year, you would now be the head of a stonking majority government. Like, none of this persecution complex makes sense in that context.
That was part of the loser vibe. I didn't jump to the conclusion as some of our colleagues and friends did, which was that this leads inevitably to election denial. My first interpretation of it was more cheerleading. Come on, do you believe the polls? Get out there, knock on doors. Like, that was my first read of it.
But I also wouldn't be surprised if it did lead to election denial.
It could, oh God, it easily could. But I think just to me that the interesting thing is more that imagine going back in time 3 months and telling Pierre Poilievre there's going to be people in sweatshirts at his rally saying, "Do you believe the polls?" And they're on his side.
Yeah.
That's all. Like, oh, you know what? One more single comment, and then we'll move on. Do you know what Jagmeet Singh was up to this week?
No.
Me neither.
Okay.
I'm being a little bit facetious. I do, but I do because I Googled it. It is an absolutely insane campaign, and we talked about this in our dispatch last week.
Have you been checking the OnlyFans pages? Because that might be why you missed it.
No, I don't know what OnlyFans is. Mark Carney's move to bring the Liberals back closer to the center and a 10-year change election narrative ought to be generational gifts for the NDP. I don't know what they're doing unless I go out of my way to find out.
Noted. All right. On that note, like and subscribe, and then we're going to hit one more thing before we call it a day, and I take my meds.
This message is brought to you by Westinghouse. Canada's energy future is being shaped by the choices we make today. As demand for reliable, clean power grows, the need for proven solutions has never been more urgent. Nuclear energy is an essential part of the solution. Westinghouse's AP1000 reactor is the world's most advanced operational Generation 3+ reactor. Proven, safe, efficient, and ready now. It can be brought online within a decade, delivering clean, reliable power when we need it most. Building AP1000 plants can strengthen our electricity export capabilities and provide Canada's nuclear supply chain with access to 100% of the global market, all while minimizing the risks of building domestic nuclear energy generation on a single technology. Westinghouse is 100% Canadian owned and buys where it builds, working with over 450 Canadian suppliers to strengthen the domestic supply chain and bring benefits home to our nation. Canada needs energy. Westinghouse is ready. Learn more at westinghousenuclear.com/Canada. So I've already mentioned my bagel, and I still think Jen did not give that anecdote the appreciation it deserved. I'm counting on the listeners and the viewers.
I often also sometimes miss social cues. So, don't take that too personally.
No, it was more criticism of you than a lament for me.
If someone yelled number 2 at me in line while I was the only, I probably wouldn't even register it as being weird. I'd be like, yes, I am I am number 2.
No, to me, it
That's
registered
fine.
as weird because I wasn't number 2. I was only customer.
If I was only customer and they were like number 2, I'd be like, thank you very much for my bagel.
No,
Did you make the bagel? Did you put the various types of ingredients that I wanted on my bagel? I didn't want cream cheese on my bagel because I don't like cream cheese. I have sensory issues. Thank you. Please do not look butter or cream cheese on my salmon bagel. Thank you.
Any of our viewers and listeners who are in any form a mental health professional or diagnostician should.
You can't diagnose me from a video.
They should get in touch with me and we'll start planning. I was leaving.
Did you cut the bagel with a knife that had butter on it? Because if you cut the knife with the bagel that had butter on it, I will freak out a little bit.
Are we good to move on? Or are you...
See, now that's the punchline.
You need a minute there? How we doing, Jen? Okay, I'm prepared to go talk about the thing I was actually at. Are you prepared to let me?
No, I'm riffing now. It's fine.
I was leaving a Canadian Club event in downtown Toronto. It was a breakfast meeting where the president and CEO of TransCanada Energy had given a speech. Francois Poirier. Sorry, I can't do French names. Sorry, nobody's perfect. He had written a letter that you probably read a couple of weeks ago. It was it got mainstream attention in a way that CEO letters normally don't, where he was basically talking about Canadian energy independence. But he also raised the issue that as the CEO of a company, he has limited reserves of capital, and it is his job to go out and invest that capital in the places and in the projects that will maximize return for the company. Mm-hmm. I think people understand that. Mm-hmm. What this Canadian CEO of a Canadian company was telling the Canadian people in this letter was that those projects are not often Canadian. TC has operations in Canada, in the United States, and in Mexico. And for reasons that he was going into, he was explaining how purely on a cost-benefit analysis, Canadian jurisdiction and regulations are often basically eliminating us from the conversation of where a company will invest this capital. Do you need a minute on the bagel? You look like you're about to start giggling there.
Sorry, no, I'm good. Okay. I was just knowing in my head, I was going like, I guess we should nationalize TC Energy then, and then I laughed at myself.
Yeah, somebody needs a bagel.
Mm-hmm.
I think most people might not know this because most people aren't nerds the way I am, but like what you can do is you can subscribe to like the National Club, the Empire Club, the Canadian Club, and you get emails saying, hey, like events coming up. And I had seen the TC Energy CEO was coming up, and I was like, you know what? That's actually going to be worth doing. Like, it's actually going to be worth getting out of my house at, 1:00 in the morning to go downtown and listen to this. And the speech did not disappoint. Now, look, every corporate CEO speech sounds kind of the same. They talk in their own language in the same way that politicians talk in their own language, that central bankers talk in their own language. I think we as a society would all be better off if all of these guys had punch-up writers. Kind of like in the way that Hollywood scripts will sometimes be like, this is a really good story, but the dialogue needs a bit of a punch-up, so you bring in a punch-up specialist who just makes the dialogue more engaging. I think that needs to happen broadly in public communication, particularly in Canada. We need 10% more Brazilian president. I forget the guy's name, but you got the chainsaw. Or Argentinian president. Argentina. Yeah. The chainsaw guy.
Yeah.
We need 10% more of that in all forward-facing public communications in Canada. But the substance of the speech was fascinating because earlier this week, I published at The Line a column simply titled, Canada Doesn't Lead. Mm-hmm. And when I did that, I had not received an embargoed copy of the speech. And then the next day, I show up at this TransCanada CEO's speech, and in his very polite and corporate way, it was my column. And when I wrote the column, I focused on diplomacy international trade, and national security and defense. I didn't talk about an industry. It's specifically, I didn't go sector specific. I didn't talk about energy. But what he was laying out in the speech, and he gave real world examples. And I'm gonna email the TC guys, and I'm gonna find out if there's a publicly available version of this, and if there is, I'm gonna drop it into our dispatch. I'll put a link to it. But he was laying out, from the perspective of the energy industry, what other countries do when it's like, we should build a new pipeline, or we should build a new LNG facility, or we should build this, that, or the other thing. And he goes, well, in Mexico or in Germany, they would do this, they would do this, they would do this. And then 8 months later, 12 months later, they would begin construction. In Canada, it's a decade plus process.
Yep.
And one of the things he was calling for in the speech, frankly, it was kind of the center of the speech, was that he wants Canada to commit itself in a reasonable time frame, say 5 years, of going from where we are now, which is 4th or 5th, I don't remember, to becoming number 1 for LNG exports to Asia. And he laid out what that would mean in terms of infrastructure that we have versus infrastructure that we would need. We would, and I don't remember his exact numbers, but it would be basically roughly doubling the export capacity on the West Coast. And look, I don't know if it's going to happen. I've been around the block once or twice on Canadian energy policy. My gut feeling is that it won't. But it was...
Yeah. Let me just stare off into the abyss for a few minutes.
It was interesting, though, to hear a Canadian CEO saying we should commit ourselves on a relatively short time frame to be the best at something.
That's nice.
And
That's nice. I like that idea.
Well,
like
it was, and it really, it resonated with my thesis in the column. In very few countries in the world would it be newsworthy for the CEO of a large commercial enterprise to say we should be the best at this. In Canada, it is. That's a cultural thing. It's a political thing. Could even be a little bit of a psychological thing. Our mental health professional listenership is getting an extra workout this week. But when I was listening to the speech, and he's rattling off facts and figures and talking about like, hey, like the demand is here. Here's what we would do. Here's some of the projects we have in the pipeline. No pun intended. Here are some other things that we would need to do in order to stand this up. The thing that just kept running through my head was, I don't remember the last time I heard a speech quite like this, in the sense that he was saying we should be beating the United States at this. We should be beating Australia at this. We should be beating Qatar at this. And here is a roadmap of infrastructure and policy levers that will be needed to do that. And he got a lot of applause in the room. The speech, I think, was very well received by the downtown crowd. But we, as a country, you and I were podcasting a month or two ago about asshole Canada. Mm-hmm. You want to know what has failed to materialize?
Asshole Canada?
Yeah.
That thing.
Just hasn't happened.
But Mike Myers flew up here and did a commercial and talked about elbows up.
Elbows up.
Elbows up. Which is pretty much the most Canadian version of asshole Canada that you could possibly imagine. I've criticized
our politicians in recent years for the announcement is the plan, right?
Yeah.
I'm starting to think that the asshole Canada plan is the slogan.
Elbows up, I think, is yeah.
Mike Myers has crystallized the sentiment of the moment with a good hockey-derived slogan. Mm-hmm. Mission accomplished. We're done. Nothing further to see here. And as you were saying in the second segment, every indicator is suggesting we are heading towards Mr. Carney being reelected as Prime Minister.
And he's
with
going to need
Justin
to
Trudeau's
himself.
cabinet.
Yep.
Justin Trudeau's advisors.
Yep.
A Mike Myers slogan.
Mm-hmm.
A party that is coming out of the gate with weird questions about foreign interference from China.
Mm-hmm.
A now hostile United States.
Mm-hmm.
global markets in absolute chaos.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the 5-day chart this week, it looks like a seismograph.
And not from one of the calmer regions.
So I'm going to see if I can find a copy of the speech. And I know it's a heavy lift to ask people to take time out of their day to go read a CEO's speech. It's an unusual thing to suggest people do. I get it. But I think it's worth reading on its own merits if I can dig up a copy. But I also think it is more interesting from the specific perspective of why do we as Canadians need to mark the unusual situation of a CEO calling for national leadership? That ought to be telling us something about ourselves.
On that note, I think that we should probably end it there because we've been going on for some time. I'm going to say like and subscribe. I'm going to come up with a very funny thumbnail. And then I'm going to go lie down.
Okay. You vlogged out of Twitter?
I vlogged out of Twitter, man.
Good for you.
Oh, very.
Everybody falls off the wagon. You have to just get back up.
No such thing as perfect sobriety.
Things are going great, everybody.
Things are going so good.
Readtheline.ca to our advertising partners. Thanks for your patience. We'll be back. We'll be back tomorrow with the anti-panel, and we're moving to a 7-day-a-week publication schedule at the line because there's just so much stuff. We already have a backlog of content accumulating for next week, which is a nice
really
place
good
to be.
stuff too. Really good stuff too. And also, like I think interviewing Barry Eichengreen has sort of raised the nerd flag, so all of the economists are rallying to us for the next week. So it's fantastic. I love it.
We love our economist friends, even if they don't get the love they deserve in the comments.
It's true.
Thanks, everybody. Take good care. I'm going to go give Jen a wellness check call. But other than that, readtheline.ca, like and subscribe. We'll talk to you tomorrow.